This is a Lowell Observatory podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to Star Stuff, a space oddity.
Welcome to Star Stuff, the podcast from Lowell Observatory where we talk about space, the universe, and everything. Today, we have a really special guest. This is Adam Nimoy. His father was known, you might know, as Spock, Mr. Spock in the Star Trek series. So Leonard Nimoy was your father, and he passed away almost a decade ago, right?
Right. Coming up on the anniversary.
Right, it is, yes. And I know that you're quite a Star Trek fan. You're a Trekkie.
Oh, yeah.
Consider
definitely. Trekkie, Trekker, whatever you want to call me. Yeah.
I've heard of the show before. I don't know if call myself a Trekkie, but my love is with the original series and with Mr. Spock. So it's a real honor to have you on our podcast today. And the really exciting thing that we're going to be sharing is you have a new book.
I do have a new book, The Most Human, Reconciling with My Father, Leonard Nimoy. We published it last June, and I've been crisscrossing the country promoting it.
Fantastic. And can you tell me what your book is about?
Well, my book is about a lot of different things. It's been characterized as a combination of recovery, 12-step recovery, Judaism, which is a part of my tradition and heritage from my dad, and Star Trek. It's really about my journey in recovery and how recovery principles helped me reconcile with my dad. I had a lot of issues, a lot of conflict with him through the years. To the point of estrangement from him, and how we were finally able to kind of reconcile and rebuild our relationships. And luckily, we were very close the last 7 years of his life.
That's awesome. I know that you were even on the set a few times from the original series as a child.
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Remember the haircut? I read about it in your book, of course, but...
Yeah, on one of the episodes, I believe is What Our Little Girl's Made Of, the captain is on the planet of the week, and Spock is in the captain's chair. And while they were rehearsing the scene, one of the assistant directors came over and got me and took me into the makeup trailer. And Fred Phillips, who did my dad's makeup every year of the original series, cut my hair. He shaved my eyebrows, from which they've never really recovered, as you can tell. And then he glued on a pair of my dad's ears, not quite the right size, but he got them on. They took me into the turbo lift, and when they started shooting that scene, I remember, it's one of these things you don't forget, so I can still see myself standing in the turbo lift waiting for that thing to open. And then I came out and gave my dad a kiss and said, "Hi, Daddy," and everybody laughed.
And if I remember correctly, weren't those manually opening doors or people pulling the...
Yeah, they were, and that was always a joke on Star Trek, which we saw in the Next Generation as well, is, if the guys weren't on it and weren't watching, sometimes those doors didn't open and people walked into them. Many blooper reels where the original cast were walking into doors that were not opened.
Walking into things. The thing that I always hear most is the classic, why weren't there seatbelts? But... because it's more fun to see them shake.
It is much more fun. Why weren't there more seatbelts? Why was every planet, Earth atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen? They didn't need space. I think there's only one episode where they're wearing suits. That was kind of odd. And there were a number of other things that people pointed out, but still it was really great entertainment and great science fiction.
Yeah, I know that there was talk of like a parallel evolution. So, life evolved similarly. So that's why they were all kind of humanoid. Never quite explained the dog alien.
Right.
That I have a framed photo of in my home. So
everybody looked like humanoid. And
Yeah. And Spock's skin was a different tone. I believe you mentioned the makeup artist for the pilot.
Yeah.
And he had them change it. Is that right?
Yeah, there was. I'm trying to remember the story about that. They were trying to give him a real green complexion, but it didn't read well on film. So I think they slowly gave up on that idea.
Right. And I heard a rumor yesterday that you can pretty much quote all of the episodes?
No,
No.
I cannot. I was just watching one of my favorite episodes is the Menagerie. It's the two-parter.
Oh, I love the Menagerie.
Yeah, which
Oh.
incorporates the original episode. And I was
Yep.
just, and I find myself saying over and over, Jim, don't stop me. Don't let him stop me. It's your career and Captain Pike's life. You must see the rest of the transmissions. And I barely got that out because it's a long little speech. Occasionally, yeah, I would joke around with my friends and we would quote some of the lines from between Kirk and Spock. And in my documentary film, For the Love of Spock, we have Jason Alexander really going at it with one of Kirk's monologues. So it's fun.
It is fun. I love the Menagerie. It was such a clever use of the film that they got from the pilot. I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and of course featured Spock very heavily in a lot of those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, not long before my dad passed, I had seen the episode because I just love it, and it's so well done, and he was so good in it. And I said to him, you were just right on. You really had, the character. He said at that point he was really on his game, is what he used to say. That they had done enough episodes that first season for him to get a grip on what the character was about. The makeup was really developed to where they were going to stick with what they had. The wardrobe was going to be consistent throughout. So it was just it was a great episode, a great Spock episode.
It really was. And I love that, in that episode and the pilot is really where you get a lot of the current shows. You get Strange New Worlds.
Right.
The new show that features Spock younger and working for Pike.
That's right.
Yeah. And I've greatly enjoyed the new series. I am a diehard original series fan, but I have seen some of the other things. I'm curious if you have watched like all of Star Trek or some of the newer shows, or is it mostly the original series?
Well, I mean, I worked on The Next Generation, so I saw a number of those episodes. I watched much of Discovery. I'm still watching Strange New Worlds and some of the episodes of Picard. Look, some of it's great, and there's a lot of controversy about it, as to whether or not it's really Star Trek. The saga continues. It's on people's minds. People are still watching it. We still, Ethan Peck has now taken up the mantle of Spock, and he's fabulous, I think.
Yes.
So more power to them. I don't always love every episode, but there are a number of what I like to call placebo episodes from the original series that they could have left, out of the canon. But and because it's very difficult to produce these shows, you're always going to come up with some episodes that are a little bit subpar. But I'm glad that people are still, interested in Star Trek. It's still around, and the conventions are still going strong, and the show still resonates almost 60 years later.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm, I guess more representative of like the newer generation that got into Star Trek. I blame my folks for getting me into the original series when I was young. But I'm curious in your father, you were talking about how like after a few episodes into that first season, he really got a hang of the character.
Yeah.
And there's something that I'm familiar with called like character bleed. And that's when your character kind of bleeds into your personality.
Oh.
Sometimes
Wow.
it's the other way. And you bleed into your character's personality. And you typically, interact with this in sometimes a negative way, right? Or like you kind of start to notice things. And I know that your father actually spoke about it in some of his books. But I'm curious from your perspective or growing up, were there parts of his character that you sort of recognize now as maybe character bleed from some of his roles that were interesting or maybe a bit more of like a positive thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a common, issue that I've had to deal with when I was younger. I mean, there's a lot of Leonard and Spock. There's a lot of Spock and Leonard. And, he talked about the fact that during those 3 years on the show that the character was so specific and introverted and in control of his emotions that he had a lot of trouble getting in and out of character. That was the whole issue. And in fact, the reason they pulled that prank on him with me was to get him to laugh, because even on the set, and I had to deal with him on the set a lot, and he was like somebody you just didn't. I just left him alone because he was really focused on the character, and I had that issue with my dad when I was younger, before Spock even came along. My dad was much like his father. He's introverted, very reserved, very cool, very distant, very remote, not warm and fuzzy and loving, like my mother, thankfully. So I was dealing with that as a young kid. And then on top of that, he brought Spock home with him. So it was kind of like, magnified, and was much more difficult. This is why we didn't really have a real loving bond and emotional connection when I was younger as a kid. And when I became a teenager and started asserting myself more, it just blew into flat out conflict with him, with no resolution. And that really was the story of our relationship for the next 30 years of our lives together.
I remember an anecdote from the book, The Most Human, your new one, about when I think it was like he took you to like a comic book store and then maybe out to eat.
Yeah.
And it was like an attempt to sort of,
yeah,
we're doing the father-son thing, but
Yeah.
there was still...
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't relate to the guy. He was just not, he was focused on other things. He was not focused on me. Look, I talk a lot about it in the book. By the way, here's the book, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance.
Yes, and we'll link to it.
All right,
as well.
Very good. Thank you. I talk about, here's the thing. I had a lot of difficulty with him. I had a lot of conflict with him. It was made worse by the fact that I was a pothead for 30 years, and my dad was an admitted alcoholic. And that just really made things worse for us. My life with him was this weird combination of incredible experiences being the son of Leonard Nimoy, because he was so incredibly successful, coupled with periodic episodes of flat-out conflict with the guy, and he was really, this is a tough kid from the streets of Boston. He was really tough to take on, and I just couldn't win with him. And it was a lot of headbanging between the two of us. But the fact is, and I'm very careful in the book in the way I describe it, is I was always proud of him, number one. Always. I mean, I'm the first Trekkie. You see the picture here is from that episode in which I am in the blooper reel. This is in June of '66. This is 6 weeks before the show is even aired. That's why I claim the mantle of the first Trekkie.
The first Trekkie.
Yeah, so I was always a fan of his work and always proud of him. And when I was watching TV as a kid, he'd pop up on all these shows, and I love that. And I talk a lot about the fact that his parents were these Russian immigrants who were also not warm and fuzzy people. I love them, had a great relationship with them. They were not supportive of him when he wanted to become an actor.
Right.
And also, and finally, the fact that when he came to LA with almost nothing at age 18, his whole focus was on survival.
Yeah.
And not family dynamics.
Right.
It just wasn't his thing. So I give him a lot of leeway and a lot of credit. And I'm trying not to lay blame or point a finger or be judgmental. I mean, I just adored my dad.
Yeah.
But he was tough to deal with, tough to live with.
And that really comes across in your book. I remember, I think when he was in the James Bond show, or what was it? Was it Mission? I didn't watch any of his other...
Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Mission Impossible. Was that good, by the way? I never watched that.
I thought some of them were terrific. He was terrific. I mean, he loved the first season because it gave him a chance to play other characters.
Oh, just to get away from
Just to get away
Spock.
with a lot of costume changes and a lot, and a lot.
Master of Disguise.
Yeah, he was Paris, the Master of Disguise.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then in season 2, it was like, get me out of here, because it was the same thing over and over with no real character development, no real inner life for Paris, the character, and he wanted out. His agent thought he was crazy, and it was risky because it was a steady income, and they were paying him very well to be on that show. And after that, it was the whole decade of the 70s was really his theater career. Thankfully, he had In Search of as well to help pay the bills. So that was a big transition for him.
Right, of course. Yeah, I didn't watch a lot of the only other thing I think I ever saw him in was I'm a huge Columbo fan. And he did an episode, a celebrity sort of episode in Columbo, which was really fun to just see him as a different character.
Yeah.
But, there was always that core of Leonard Nimoy that came through, I think, in some of those characters. It was like, yep, there he is.
Yeah, I mean, that's why the theater work, I think, was so important to him, because, and for me, too, to witness all this, because, in some of the theater work he did, he was much more involved and invested in the characters, and it was not Leonard Nimoy. It was like, I couldn't recognize him. And that's when I really started to see this is a real artist who wants to really stretch himself and see how far he can go. And there were a number of roles. He was in Tevye on Fiddler on the Roof, and
That's right.
Martin Dysart in Equus, and he was in Man in the Glass Booth. And he was fabulous in those roles to the point where was really stretching, his capabilities, and I could really see that this was a guy and really, trying to break new ground in his career.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I don't know, of course, his full work, but I know that I really connected with his poetry. Big fan of his poetry, and I know he got into photography, which I know you enjoyed as well. So, I'm curious, what of you kind of came out like of that you're like, oh yeah, I get that from my dad.
Well, I get a lot from my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, like pig-headedness for one thing.
Oh no.
Yeah, there's definitely that. Well, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of different interests like him. My dad was a true Renaissance man, and he was, he was a real artist in process, always trying to express himself artistically, whether it was in the theater, film, or TV, directing, getting behind the camera, his poetry books, his photography work. I mean, this is a guy, who was really trying to, just had a lot of different interests. He had a pilot's license. He was a fabulous,
that's right.
he had a private plane, a single prop plane. I always felt very safe and secure with him. He was an amazing sailor from growing up on the Charles River in Boston.
Right.
He was an excellent sailor. I mean, this is a guy with a lot of interest. And the interesting thing about my dad was he was a man of incredible, he was an incredibly bright man for a guy with so little formal education. I mean, he barely made it through high school.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean that's what really pissed his parents off. They wanted him to go to college and to go to med school or law school, which he had no intention of doing. But he had a real inquisitive mind. He had a very sharp mind. He was amazing with numbers, an incredible businessman. I learned so much from him in terms of the way he handled his own affairs, his own financial affairs. So there are a lot of things I learned from him, and I hear myself, and I hear him and me sometimes, and sometimes it happened in the book where I could hear what there's an episode where I had a little conflict with my son Jonah, who was just like my dad. I couldn't get him to do any schoolwork. And I came down on him, like a ton of bricks one day. And I could just hear my dad in my voice, and I just could not stop myself. And Jonah turned to me and crying, and he said, "You have no idea how much I hate you right now." And I thought to myself, you have no idea how much I hate myself, because I was trying to break this cycle of the issues that I had, the father-son issues I had with my dad. So there's a lot of Leonard in me, and he had he's just a very inspirational character for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we've all been there. I hear my mother's voice come out of my mouth more than I care to admit, and the older I get, the more often it happens. And a musician too. I mean, singer. I think one of my favorite things he ever did was a cover of When I Was a Carpenter. I used to listen to that pretty much nonstop when I was in college. I had a lot of friends, you can tell. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I loved in your book, covering that. The story of the, recovery and also raising children, which I've never had the honor to do yet, and balancing all of that. And in the end, your reconciliation, I think, is really great. You said about those last 7 years, you really connected. Can you talk about that connection a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it was really just a question of, it was all about recovery. It's like patience, tolerance, acceptance, loving kindness. My dad I just had to change the game with him, because we were not doing very well together. And I talked about in the book that he wrote me a very long letter of his grievances and his disappointment in me, and the direction I was given by one of my brothers in recovery was to make an amends to him for the letter, which I refused to do initially because I didn't think it was appropriate, and I didn't want to capitulate to him. I didn't want to give in. I was standing my own ground with him, trying to create my own identity, really. Yeah. But I did. It was something that my dad needed from me, and I gave it to him, not completely willingly, but I'm glad I did it because it just changed the game. After I made my amends to him that's typical of 12-step recovery. Steps 8 and 9 is about making amends to people that you had harmed while you were lost in your addiction. My dad never made an amends to me for his alcoholism. He had stopped drinking when he was in the 1990s, probably about 6 years before I stopped smoking weed and drinking altogether. But that, what was important is that I keep my side of the street clean. I keep the focus on myself. I do the work and not worry so much about him and where he's at with his recovery. But it changed the game with him. He immediately, his attitude towards me changed right away, and he was, became a very the loving parent that I always needed him to be. He was at a different stage in his life at that point because he was semi-retired and very comfortable, had a very comfortable lifestyle, and wasn't worried about going out and generating income. And yet his focus was on family. He said this in an interview. His focus was on family. And when I had some tragic events happen to me, at that point in my life, my dad was very much my go-to guy to help me, and he was just a good parent to me during that period. So we just grew very close together to the point where we went to Boston together to make a documentary film about his life there. A great experience between him and I, and we were making the Spock doc. This really began in November of 2014 in anticipation of 50 years of Star Trek. We were going to make a Spock doc to kind of add to the legacy of Trek and celebrate the 50 years. And it was during the process of developing that film that he passed away.
Yeah, that was a really difficult day, I know, for a lot of people around the world, and I'm sure no exclusion here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, I was overwhelmed. I couldn't believe the outpouring of emotion for him. And it was, the President of the United States was issuing a statement about the passing of Leonard Nimoy. It was pretty incredible. And people were coming out of the woodwork contacting me, who I had not heard from or seen in decades. It was really lovely. And, and while I'm promoting this book, I'm still talking to people like you who are fans all over the country. They're all over the world. I mean, I see images of Spock. I was traveling with my son, Jonah. He's in, this band, The Offspring. They're all over the world. And last year I was in Madrid and Lisbon with them, and there's like images of Spock everywhere.
Yeah, there's a really fun kind of spoof of the menagerie in Turkey. So the Turkish guy for a bit and lived over there, and he was like, "Oh, you like Star Trek? Wait until you see this Turkish version of Star Trek that they did in honor of Star Trek." And it was just the funniest thing ever, just to see, the impact that it had. One of the things that I most really connected with Spock was that sort of two worlds that you get with Spock. You get obviously half Vulcan, half human. You get an otherness, though. He doesn't quite fit in in any sort of region of his life, basically. And he has to adjust. And he's othered in that way. And he learns to, through his character, like, accept that. And he gets, friends, or like with Bones, and their kind of relationship that grows into a true friendship. And I'm curious, you have your, and I, of course, have read both of your books. I know, like, you have a very full life, and your children have their full life, and you have the things that you're interested in, and then you have you being a fan of Star Trek. But then you have the intimacy of Star Trek that you have experienced in your relationship with your father. And do you find yourself trying to fit into both worlds, or do you sort of just see that as one from the same planet, so to speak?
Well, yeah, look, I just go with the flow. It's a part of my life. It's a part, I grew up with it. It's my story too, in a way, which is what I'm celebrating now, in talking about my relationship with my dad and my love of Star Trek. I have my own interests and my own career, practicing law, directing TV, teaching filmmaking. I've always had my own, way to go, my own path. My kids will sometimes say to me, like, "You're your own man and enough of Star Trek, and we don't want to hear any more about Star Trek." But the fact of the matter is, my daughter works at Paramount, which made all things Star Trek, and she's constantly being confronted by people who are, like, she told me she was at a staff meeting several months ago, and they merged the company with CBS, and it was with a bunch of new people she was working with, and her boss introduced her as Leonard Nimoy's granddaughter, and everybody applauded. And my son, bumped into Jeff Goldblum several years ago, and Jeff was commenting on Jonah's drumming, and Jonah said, "Well, you worked with my grandfather, Leonard Nimoy, on Invasion of the Body Snatchers," and Jeff was like, "Whoa!" They made this great great connection.
Yeah.
So they have these experiences too,
Yeah.
even though they struggle with their own identity too. We all do that, but and the tricky part is that it's Leonard's life, it's Leonard's career. Leonard created Star Trek. I'm just here celebrating it with everybody else.
Yeah.
It's not. It totally doesn't totally define me.
Mm-hmm.
We all, Jonah's in a rock band. Maddie's a production executive.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our own lives and our own careers, but why deny it? I mean, the Love Fest is amazing.
It really is.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and it, like you said, it's worldwide.
Yeah.
And the respect and love the art that your father gave to the world is profound, and I don't think it's going anywhere. And it's fascinating to read your book and understand how that has affected your life both in greatly positive and negative ways.
Yeah.
And I encourage, anybody listening to this, I really encourage you to get this book. It's wonderful. We have a bunch of copies in the gift shop, though I don't know if we'll have too many left after this weekend. Mm-hmm. Do you have anywhere website where they
Well,
can...
I do. I mean, okay, you can go to adamnimoy.com to find out where I am, and in terms of promoting the book.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of buying the book, I would strongly urge people to support their local bookstores.
Yes.
We have the Village Well in Culver City, which is in my neighborhood, and I've had events there, and they're carrying the book. But you can get it at the usual, places online as well.
Sure. Yes. Support your local bookstore. It's for sale at the local bookstore here, Brightside Books in Flagstaff, and call your bookstore and ask them to carry it. Ask them to buy a few copies and buy it from them direct. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. As you know, I am a huge fan of your father's work, and it's truly an honor that you've spent time here at the observatory. Your father was here quite a few years ago, and I know I enjoyed the experience a lot, and I hope you've really enjoyed being here at Lowell.
I love being here. It's absolutely amazing. It's mind-boggling, the work that has happened here, the breakthroughs that have occurred here, the work you guys continue to do here, the new Astronomy Discovery Center that you have opened up here. It's a phenomenal community of people, and I'm so pleased and privileged and honored to be invited here. Thank you so much.
Well, you're definitely the guest of honor for this weekend's Pluto Festival. And for those listening to this recording, if you didn't make it to the Pluto Festival, you are missing out. It has just been a days of parties, and we still have a full weekend to go. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It's been a true honor. And to everybody watching and everyone on YouTube, shall we?
Live long and prosper.
This podcast was made possible by our members and donors. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support our nonprofit in making more digital education like this available, go to lowell.edu/donate. Thanks for listening.